Okay, so for today, we are going to be completing your very last science study guide. I know it's extremely sad, but we do want to make sure you have everything you need to study for the test. The test will be next Friday. May 15th. Okay, so just keep in mind that you don't have necessarily a planner or an agenda right now. So the responsibility of studying for that really falls on you. So just make sure you are reviewing this at least every night. The first part of this, I went ahead and gave you the vocabulary review section. I gave you the definition. Your job is to write in the term. Hopefully this is pretty easy by now, considering we've already had the vocab test or quiz and other things. So hopefully this should be a bit of a review by now, but if not, make sure you study this part. So number 1, a small growth at the tip or on the side of a stem that later develops into a flower or branch. This is a bud. Number 2, a plant that has veins or specialized tissue called xylem and phloem. Right away, you should know that this is a vascular plant. Okay, so you guys can see this. Number 3, a specialized plant tissue that transports water and minerals high up through the stem, the top of the plant. High is my keyword there. This is going to be the xylem, because xylem has a Y, so it goes high. Number 4, a plant that depends on the processes of diffusion and osmosis to move materials. If it is having to rely on diffusion and osmosis, that means it does not have veins, so that would be a non-vascular plant. Number 5, a minute opening in the outer layer of a plant through which gaseous interchange takes place is a stoma. Plural would be stomata. The main stalk of a plant that develops buds and sprouts and usually grows above ground is a stem. The leafless underground part of a plant that stores food and holds the plant in place is the root. A specialized plant tissue that transports food dissolved in water and sap down is phloem. Phloem to the flow, so it goes low. The act of spreading evenly, this is diffusion. Remember, just like a diffuser in your room or in your home or something. Number 10, a type of seed with one cotyledon as a monocot. Remember that prefix mono means one. Usually flat green parts that grow from the plant stem. That's going to be leaves. Number 12, a type of seed with two cotyledons. It's going to be a dicot. That prefix di means two. 13, male and female gametes join to make a fertilized egg, which develops into offspring. This is describing a type of reproduction that involves the male and female gamete coming together. So that's going to be sexual reproduction. Number 14, the process by which green plants make their own food. Sunlight is used by the plant to create glucose. That is photosynthesis. Number 15, sugar that is stored in roots and fruits is the glucose. Number 16, this is released from animals during respiration. Plants use this to make their own food. It's going to be carbon dioxide, also known as CO2. Hopefully you know what that stands for by now. Number 17, a mature male or female cell involved in reproduction is a gamete. Going on to the back. Number 18, a plant in which the flower is the reproductive organ of the plant is going to be an angiosperm. A tree or bush that has cones, usually an evergreen. Cones is your keyword there. This is going to be a conifer or a cone producing tree. And then a plant that produces no flowers, this is a really hard one, non-flowering plant. Clearly I was being sarcastic there. Plant that produces no flowers is non-flowering. Very hard to remember. Okay, characteristics of plants, fill in the blank. So all of this information is coming pretty much straight from the classification chart that we did. I highly recommend that you put this paper with your study guide. I know when I'm finished, I'll put kind of all this together, but all this information is going to come from this chart. So the plant kingdom can be divided into two groups of plants, blank and blank. Here's the plant kingdom. It's divided into two main phyla, non-vascular and vascular. Non-vascular plants are also known as the bryophytes. The three main non-vascular plants are mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. And then how do they transport water? They absorb water directly into their cells. We're going to skip number 4. Technically, the answer would be spores, but we just learned about that a little bit yesterday, so I'm not really going to have that on your test. But how do they transport water? They absorb it directly into their cells. Kind of like a paper towel. And we saw that with the moss experiment. Number 6, describe non-vascular plants, their size, where they live, and what they look like. So first I'm going to describe their size. They're usually smaller. They grow kind of closer to the ground. Where do they grow? They always have to live near water because we know they don't have those veins to transport the water. Therefore, every part of the plant has to be touching water in order for it to survive. We also know that they have, what they look like, they have no true roots, stems, or leaves, which obviously means they have no veins or vascular tissue, no tubes to transport water nutrients. Then, vascular groups are classified into two main groups. Again, you're not going to have this paper with you on the test, but you can find your answer here, obviously. Vascular is divided into two groups, seeds and seedless. Seeds and seedless. And then of the seed-bearing plants, they are classified into two main groups, the angiosperms and gymnosperms. Okay. Now, characteristics of vascular plants. Oh, again, any of these ones that are crossed off are not going to be on our test because we didn't really get to go over them very well, and I didn't feel like that would be fair. So you can cross off 9, 10, and 11 down here. Characteristics of vascular plants. All vascular plants have organs such as roots, stems, and leaves. Remember, all of those are multiple tissues working together, which is the very definition of an organ. In angiosperms, they also have another organ called flowers. Number 3, the part of the plants that live below the soil is called the root. And the purpose of the roots is 2 things: to get water and nutrients, and to anchor the plant in the soil, keep it from getting blown around or moved. Okay, number 5, the roots also provide water and minerals needed for making food. They need those for the process of photosynthesis, which is the way they make their food. Number 6, the blank system includes the leaves, the stem, and also the flowers and fruit of the plant. Note, this is anything that is above the ground, okay, which we said in our notes is the shoot system. Anything above the ground. In a vascular plant, tube-like structures called blank transport water and minerals in an upward direction. Okay, so if it's going to go high, we know we need the type of tube that has a Y, so that's the xylem. Number 8, the blank tissues send food from the leaves to the other parts of the plant. Okay, if it's going from the leaves, okay, to the other parts of the plant, that means it's going down. Okay, phloem to the flow, so it goes low. So this is the phloem tissue. Number 9, in the carbon dioxide oxygen cycle, plants take in carbon dioxide to make their food, and they release oxygen through their stomata. And then lastly, photosynthesis happens in the chloroplast of a plant cell. All right. Now, moving on to the bottom part here, all of this has to do with the parts of the flower and how they're used in reproduction. So 23, I don't know why it goes from 10 to 23, just ignore that. In angiosperms, the flower is the reproductive part of the plant. Okay, that's what they use to reproduce and make more of themselves. That's what the flower is for. So what is the purpose of the pistil? The pistil, remember, not the pew-pew pistil, but this is the female reproductive part of the plant. Okay. Then at the top of that pistil is the stigma. So the purpose of the stigma, we're going to say it is the top of the pistil. And it is sticky to collect the pollen. Okay. 26, what is the purpose of the style? Remember, if the female part, I'm just going to draw it out here. We have kind of the ovary down there at the bottom. There's the stigma. This right here is the style. Okay, so the purpose of that, really all it does is hold up the stigma. Okay. What is the purpose of the stamen? If the pistil is the female reproductive part, for stamen, remember it has the word men in it, okay? This is the male reproductive part. Number 28, what is the purpose of the anther? Really, the only thing it does is produce the pollen grains. And then the filament, this is kind of sad to say, but really the only job of the filament is to hold up the anther. What is the purpose of the ovary? Remember, the ovary is this bottom part of the pistil, and the job of the ovary is to house or hold the ovules. which we know are the egg cells used for reproduction. Okay? And then 31, what is the purpose of the ovules? These are the egg cells. Well, we'll say the female egg cells will be a little more specific, which will later become seeds if they get fertilized. Okay, moving on to the next side. I'm going to get to this down here in just a minute, but we'll start from the top. What is the purpose of the petal? Remember, the petal is bright and smells nice in order to attract pollinators. Whether that be a bug, an insect, a bird, animal, wind, whatever that may be. And then 33, what is the purpose of the sepal? It is to protect the bud until it blooms into a full-grown flower. Okay, stages of reproduction. Blank is the first stage of reproduction in flowering plants. The very first thing that has to happen, we said in our notes, was pollination. Okay, and then 39 is just asking what pollination is. Pollination is the transfer of pollen from anther to stigma. Okay, after pollination, blank is the second stage. Oh, look, we have two 39s. Clearly, I do not know how to count. Look, 33 to 38. Seriously? Come on, Miss Dorsey. Anyways, 39. Blank is the second stage. That's going to be fertilization. Okay. Before the fertilization can happen, the pollen grain forms a tube that goes inside the pistil, down, and finally inside the ovary to the ovule. Okay, that's where it ends. Number 41, the fertilization occurs when the male gamete cell and the female gamete cell unite or come together or meet. Then in the third stage of flowering plants, blank die and the ovary begins to grow. There's two things that begin to wilt off once the fertilization has happened. It's the petals and the stamens. Then 43, then the ovary continues to blank. The stamen and petals fall away. The ovary continues to grow. 44, the ovary finally grows into a mature or fully ripened fruit. And the mature fruit houses seeds. That's the whole goal. All right, now, the pictures that you see down here, I used these pictures before in the JunoPod and had you kind of pick which description described what was happening in the picture. For the test, however, I'm going to have these pictures out of order. Your job is to give me the order that the pictures should be in to make sense. And the way you'll label them is with the letter that I've put in the bottom corner. Now, the letters, they don't make a word, they don't go in alphabetical order or anything like that, but I do want you to write them in order of what happens first to what happens last. And you'll do this same thing in the JunoPod for the test. So, for example, I would look at these pictures and I would say, okay, first, the first one that happens is, I said pollination up here was the first part. So the picture that describes pollination is picture X. So X should go first. Second, I know that fertilization has to happen. The picture that describes fertilization is picture L because I can see that the pollen grains attached to the pistil, the pollen tube begins to go down to the ovary, and so that the male sex cell can unite with the female sex cell. So second has to be picture L. Third, so I've used this one and this one. Third has to be G, because the ovary is beginning to grow, but this ovary is bigger than this one. So I know this has to happen first. So third would be picture G. Fourth would then be S. 5 would then be H, this one, because it's showing me the ovary has matured into, or has grown into a mature fruit or a fully ripened fruit. And then the last one, 6th, would be picture A, because I can see that the seeds inside are ready to be planted and grow a new plant. So in the Juno Pod, I'm going to have you type your answer in. So what you would actually type into the box would be X, L, G, S, H, A. Okay, so that would be my answer for this. All right. And clearly I wrote off side of the page. Then number 50 says to label the parts of the flower. We've had this before as a review in one of the Juno Pods as well, but it will be on the test. We'll start with letter D. Okay, remember that is representing this whole middle part here, this whole middle structure. That's the female part of the plant, which is the pistil, P-I-S-T-I-L. Okay, the P-I-S-T-O-L is the gun, like pew pew. I just kind of like saying that, pew pew. Anyways, the top of the pistil is letter A. That's going to be the stigma. The middle, the long part that connects the stigma to the ovary is the style. Remember, ladies have style, the female part. C is pointing to this entire base down here. Okay, that's going to be the ovary. And then letter J is pointing to what's inside the ovary. That would be the ovules. Okay. Letter I is pointing to these the little outer ring leaves. That's going to be the sepal. Protects the bud until it's ready to bloom. G is pointing to this part right here. It would be pink if the picture were colored. That would be the petal. H is pointing to this whole structure here, which we know is the male part of the flower. That's the stamen. The men reminds me it's the male part. And then the top of the stamen is the anther. And the stalk that holds the anther is the filament. Okay. All right, and then the last part on the back, normally this is an essay question that says to describe the difference between a vascular and non-vascular plant. However, I'm not going to have you write an essay on the test just because with all of the typing and stuff, it gets a little bit difficult. So instead, I've decided that this is going to be a which of these is not true, a vascular or non-vascular plant type of format. So it'll be something more like this. I'll give you the question and then I will list out a couple different characteristics, and your job will be to tell me which of these is not a characteristic of vascular or non-vascular plants, or something similar. So for example, this is a copy of an essay that I did last year for the test, but down here we went through and made a T-chart of some characteristics of vascular and non-vascular plants. Feel free to write this in the essay section if you want, just to be able to study it. But for example, vascular plants have veins. They also have organs like roots, stems, and leaves. They can grow tall because they have those tubes to transport water from the ground up. They get water and nutrients by xylem and phloem. And some examples would be something like sunflowers or roses. Okay, those could all be characteristics of vascular plants. Characteristics of non-vascular plants: they have no veins, they have no true organs, no true roots, stems, or leaves. They're usually shorter. They get water by absorption or absorbing the water directly into their cells. And then their examples include mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. So just make sure you know the characteristics of each one. That way you can either pick out which characteristic matches or which doesn't belong, however I decide to form the question. But that's the way we'll do that instead of the writing the whole essay, because that can get a little complicated sometimes. So, but that's the last part of your study guide. So again, the test will be next Friday. Make sure you spend time studying all of these things before then. Do not try and cram it in at the last second. It's somewhat of a big test, but it's not horrible, especially since I've kind of condensed it for the online format. But I would make sure that you have this along with your study guide to go over. There's not going to be a section where you have to like fill this out, or it's not going to be blank and you tell me what goes where. But you do have to know this chart to be able to answer some of the questions. Like, for example, the questions that we did here. Okay, vascular plants are classified into two main groups, etc. So I would kind of keep all of these together, as well as maybe even your vocab sheet. But I have kind of gone through and picked out, these are the 20 vocab words you have to study for the test. So yeah, just make sure you study hard, do well, and we'll see how it goes. Let me know if you have any questions.